It's a long fly ball going back. And the ball shatters the sky, bringing the ocean itself down into the stadium. Oh, Simpson just broke this dream's reality wide open.
It's a mutiny. The captain thinks the world is around, see? But we all know it's a flat, right?
Of course it's flat. Sure, I know the world is flat.
Well, so do I. Everybody knows that.
Good.
We don't have time for a meeting of the Flat Earth Society.
If I say that the world is round and someone else says it's flat, that's worth reporting.
The journalist's obligation when writing a story is to give equal column space to all sides. And if someone says the Earth is round and someone says the Earth is flat, at some point you're going to make a judgment. The Earth is flat people is just flat out wrong. I will not be giving them the attention. We're wasting time, and I'm not doing a service to in my role of informing the public.
Now, there are very few universal truths in the world. One is food always tastes better when somebody else is paying for it. Universal truth. The other is that everybody in this room was taught the story of how Columbus went before Queen Isabella of Spain, and he was going to prove to her that the world was round. Do you know what Queen Isabella of Spain, pretty smart woman, I gotta believe, would have said to Christopher Columbus if he laid this line on her? She would look to him and go, Christoffel. Aristotle figured out the world was round 2,000 years ago. This is 1492, the year they invented the globe. So this world is round story is 100% bullshit. It's total fiction. Yet how did our grandparents learn this? We learned this. Our grandchildren are probably going to learn this. How come? Because history is pop culture.
It's the third time I've said that. I'll probably say it 3 more times. See, in my line of work, you got to keep repeating things over and over and over again for the truth to sink in, to kind of catapult the propaganda.
Wow. No, here's the difference. We can describe gravity. We can say what it does to other things. We can measure it, predict with it. But when you start asking, like, what it is,
Have you ever wondered why we have heard about a force called gravity our entire lives, and yet nobody has ever been able to prove that it exists, even though untold numbers of experiments have been performed seeking its cause? Academics have proposed many strange solutions to their mythical gravity by inventing many theories about gravitational attraction. Inward pulling gravity, gravitons, gravity waves, 4D warped space and time, to name just a few. It is even claimed that gravity has a velocity, though nobody can explain what is traveling to create this invented force. Scientists do not even know how their mythical force operates, whether it is graviton particles, gravity waves, a strange, unexplainable force which acts at a distance through empty space, or a 4-dimensional warped space and time delusion. It's claimed by academia that gravity is responsible for the formation of the Big Bang universe, which, as anyone with discernment knows, is an impossibility as well, and that without gravity, the universe would be without thermal energy and composed only of equally spaced particles. The answer has been staring academics in the face for several generations now. Electric laws were unknown to Newton in his time. However, now we know with great accuracy the effects of electricity as obeying the inverse square law. The fact is that so-called magnetism, which in reality is electricism, light, sound, and radiation are all electric motions. All motion in the universe is electric. This is why the myth called gravity conforms to the inverse square law, since it is electric force which creates the effects falsely attributed to the fictitious force called gravity. Electric force in all forms, scales, and pressures, from the elements to the galaxies, obey this foundational, inverse square law. In the course of this book, gravity is a myth and does not exist. Electricity is the only force in the universe. It will be shown that the force called gravity, which was created by Newton and later modified by Einstein and others, does not exist and is purely mythical in its creation. the consequences of this conclusion are immense. It means that a huge list of non-existent entities have been invented by academic scientists based on the mathematics of the non-existent force of gravity. For example, here are a few of the many academic science myths created from their foundational myth called gravity. Dark matter, dark energy, black holes, singularities, event horizons, WIMPs, MOND, machos, neutron stars, gravitational collapse, gravitons, gravity waves, quantum gravity, inward pulling gravity, gravitational lensing, the gravitational constant, the Schwarzschild radius, gravitational radiation, frame dragging, general relativity, anti-gravity, virtual gravitons, and quantum field theory, which are in fact false as well. With the fall of academic gravity theory, all of these other fallacious theories fall with it. No experiments are required to prove my assertions, since we have volumes of data from experiments already cataloged, which only need to be converted to the understanding that the electric force is the cause of everything in our electric universe, and not a mythical and magical gravitational force that acts at a distance, or warps space and time to control all heavenly bodies in our infinite, electric universe.
We have a very interesting subject this morning, and of course, it'll probably be interesting and unsolved when we finish, because it deals with one of the most curious and neglected areas of human research, and that is the magnetic fields, not only of man, but of the universe and of the smallest atom. And the old folks of the Greek and Egyptian period represented the human being as contained within a kind of bubble. This bubble was referred to also by the physician and who did the human atmosphere studies, Dr. Kilner of the University. Every form in nature, natural or artificial, has a magnetic field. From the tiniest atom to the greatest galaxy, the magnetic fields are present, and the rules of each of them must be obeyed. Now, if an individual looking at a geometric solid sees in it a perfect proportion, this realization enters into the subconscious life of the person. The imagery of that solid is sent into the consciousness in the form of a benevolent magnetic center. It means that the individual is seeing a harmony, is seeing something in perfect order and perfect correctness. And in this, and in visualizing it, wherever we see perfection, it improves ourselves. Wherever we accept discord as inevitable, it injures ourselves. Everywhere looking around us in nature, we see that all natural things are benevolent. It is only when these are abused, mostly by humanity, that these benevolences are lost. So we find that we live in a universe in which everything is in harmony if we are.
They correspond to the frequency of the distance in the atoms in the structure. The distance between the atoms in a structure is equal to the wavelength, which will resonate that structure. Once you find the resonant frequency with the Tesla waves, you have effectively trapped and aligned the atoms. You can now tune the frequency a tiny bit higher, causing diamagnetism by squeezing the atoms together, restricting the electron orbits.
Today there is quite an interest in little stones, all kinds of stones. We are interested in the crystals that form in rocks and all these types of things. But crystals are formed by magnetism. They are formed by a rate of vibration peculiar to a certain element. And that particular rate of vibration can evolve through the mineral, plant, vegetable, and animal. It is always present. There is a magnetic core on each kingdom, and each kingdom unfolds within this magnetic field. And within each of the composite fields, individual members of the field, with various degrees of growth, are variously individually conditioned. Everywhere, this process of keeping faith with integrity becomes the natural secret of security, survival, and world peace. We all live within air and have our being, and we know that if the air fails, we die. But what we do not realize is that air is not just some oxygen or helium or something of this nature. Air is something in itself. It is a substance of itself. It is a substance so real and so important that it's almost impossible to estimate it. It is a tremendous field of magnetic energy. The atmosphere carries. We are in the presence of a mysterious agent, an agent that is part of everything that we are. Now, studying magnetism as it comes into the human body, we discover along with Tilda that each human body is surrounded by an etheric or energy field. This energy field is sometimes referred to as an aura, but it is not the true aura that we think of in metaphysics. This magnetic field is an area of energy. This area of energy forms an egg-like atmospheric sheath around the physical body, usually extending 3 to 5 feet from it in each direction. This energy field is the basis of virtue, because this energy field depends for its reality, its serviceability, and its protecting power to mood, emotion, thought, and the attitudes of the person around which this magnetic field is gathered. In other words, the individual, if they are normal, if mentally, emotionally, and physically they are keeping the rules, this magnetic field forms a tremendous protection. It is normal, it is healthy, it is constantly able to handle infections and all kinds of difficulties. It will help to heal wounds. It will help to recover the use of functions and organs. And if we are deprived of some part of the body, it will try to compensate for it. As long as the individual takes proper care of his magnetic field, it will serve him. The beginning of the study of magnetism can be traced back to Egypt, and the staffs and wands of the ancient priests were instruments of magnetic conjuring. Also, we find the Greeks used it, and among the Greeks and early Egyptians, we have the first understanding of the nature of magnetism. It was used principally in healing. It was well known to Pythagoras, who gave us considerable information on the subject, which was promptly forgotten by everybody else. Then we have little knowledge of it, except through the Arabs. The Chinese were aware of it because of the discovery of the mariner's compass. But for the most part, it was neglected until the 17th century, when it became involved in the story of Rosicrucianism. The alchemists, the Rosicrucians, and the Hermetists all were unfolding phases of magnetic theory. The first, probably in more modern times, to use it for healing purposes was Paracelsus of Hohenheim. It was also used strongly by the Rosicrucians and written about in considerable detail by Robert Flood, who was one of the great Rosicrucian apologists. It was also very well known to Athanasius Kircher, the great Jesuit scholar, but for the most part it was ignored. Then we come down a little later and we come upon a curious instrument, Mesmer's magnetic tub. This was a kind of tank in which many people put their feet at the same time and held hands and created a battery out of the water in the tank. It was studied carefully by Cagliostro. It is also known that it interested Saint Germain profoundly, but it annoyed Benjamin Franklin all to pieces. He was never able to like the idea at all. After the developments of Mesmer, which were promptly denied by nearly every field of science, the matter dropped into comparative obscurity until more recent times, when within the last 20-25 years it has been revived strongly. And it's this revival that we want to talk about a little this morning, because it is one of the most interesting phases of our study of life. It is interesting that we should use magnetism so continuously and yet never really understand what it is. Ptolemy of Alexandria was one of the first to recognize the manifestations or emanations of solar light as containing an energy in addition to merely a luminous factor. The study of the magnetic powers of the sun will be more or less clearly understood by the study of the seasons. Winter, summer, spring, and these things have all to do with a magnetic factor in the air. And we think of it only as in trying to explain it as a physical astronomical phenomena, since as the rotation and revolutions of the sun and planets. But each of these planets is a field of magnetic energy. And this energy comes to us through what we call air. Now, what is air, actually? Well, we have scientific definitions of it, but there's something more to it than that. Air is something in itself. It is a substance. It is not only a condition of climate or of weather, it is a basic factor in the contributions which make up existence. One thing we have learned from television is that air transmits. We know, for instance, that we can have all kinds of programs on the air at the same time. And they can come from all directions. And they can overlap and interlap. But each one will remain separately identified as though it was moving in a channel or a circuit of its own. And all these scrambling films, some of which are scrambled inside as well as outside, are working on one atmosphere, and that atmosphere is keeping each one of them in a perfect orbit of its own. You can have a dozen programs, if you turn them on, turn them off, but none of those programs is going through the air in the form we see it. We see the murder committed on the screen, and we see it broadcast into a theater somewhere or into a home. But it isn't the murder that's going into the home. The murder has not been visible when it went through the air. Something went through was vibration. And this vibration in the magnetic field can be divided into an infinite complexity of separate emanations. In other words, if we had 1,000 different channels, they could be differentiated in the magnetic field, so that each one would be broadcast correctly and properly for whatever it is. Thus we realize there's something out there besides air, something besides helium and oxygen, something besides the ordinary factors we take into consideration scientifically. Now, the problem of morality in this is very definite. The moment we break rules, we damage that magnetic flow. We have got to keep the laws of nature, and these in turn are the laws of God, or the magnetic field fails. It can fail because of physical intemperances, which reduce its integrity and reduce its power. It can be wasted in riotous living, which is a common cause these days. It can be variously destroyed by moods, by attitudes, by fears, by complexes. It can be destroyed or damaged by alcohol, drugs, narcotics, all kinds of things. But if this field is damaged, it immediately reacts into health. It damages the individual's vitality. It makes him more easily subject to contagions and infections, and it definitely shortens the life expectancy. Now, this is a phase of morality that is generally overlooked. It is assumed that these magnetic fields are something you don't pay much attention to. They're there, maybe they'll help a little. But the truth of the matter is that practically the whole survival of the individual depends upon maintaining the integrity of this flow of energy into the magnetic field. This energy comes from the sun. It comes through a mysterious energy tube in the magnetic field. It enters the individual through the crown of the head. It disseminates through the entire body, and it's excreted back again through the lower centers of the body and is recleansed by the solar energy. This is a kind of a little private tank or capsule of life that we are all carrying about with us all the time. Now, if this is so, why do we want to consider it as a moral factor? In other words, what is morality? To the ancients, it was obedience to the words of God or the laws of God. In more modern times, with more intelligent people, it is obedience with the evident will of deity as manifested in creation. Virtue lies in whatever builds up the magnetic fields. Vice is that which tears them down. No human interception can interfere with this in any way. Therefore, if we are good, it's not because the book says we should be. It's not because it was thundered by the laws on Sinai. It is because we keep the rules of the integration of the human structure. That we use the magnetic fields correctly and protect our health and our happiness and our well-being in that way. Now we think of the magnetic field as surrounding the entire structure of the body, as Kilner shows in his work on the human atmosphere, and Babbitt also in his study of the atom. This, however, is only a phase of it. Each part of the body has a magnetic field. Each unit within the individual has its survival in a unit of energy. And this unit of energy is present in the smallest subdivision of imaginable space. It is in the tiniest atom. There is no such a thing as a dead particle in the universe. Even if it is killed by something, the very disintegrating process is a symbol of life energy. Therefore, we are confronted with the natural problem of realizing that virtue is to keep the law of the energy field. Now, the law of the energy field, just by coincidence, is also the law of integrity. The energy field is what establishes right and wrong. The energy field tells us that to lose our disposition and temper fit is wrong. To use various negative, destructive attitudes is wrong. To compromise the principles of right living is wrong. To think badly, to feel unpleasantly, to be engaged in any action or concept which is contrary to the common good damages the magnetic field and therefore is wrong. Selfishness injures that field. Every vice we know, the breaking of any of the 10 Commandments and a number of other rules results in damage to that field. It has nothing to do with nation. It has nothing to do with the ordinary concepts of codes, because the final code itself is based upon the life principle in each part of the human constitution. So we have each little cell has its own moral responsibilities. The stomach has its own magnetic field. The stomach is not simply an organ. It is an organism. It is a living thing within the human body. The same is true of the heart, the brain, the glandular structure, all the organs, the intestines, all the motor system, the nervous system, the endocrine system. These are all entities. They are entities of magnetic unities. They are part of living organisms which are cooperating together for the common good. To abuse one is to damage all. To neglect one is to neglect all. Each of these organs has its own field in the body, and all these fields together constitute the grand magnetic field that surrounds the complete person. The physical factor is only a fragment of it. The main problem is to realize that behind all of these problems, whether of government or of religion or of philosophy, all these things are in trouble because of lack of integrity. And integrity is simply keeping the laws and rules of energy fields. But it will always come through, although it is coming through a medium which we can't see, and at any point along the way there's no program noticeable, no program possible. But at a proper point, a receiving station can recreate that particular program in all its detail, although it was passed through maybe thousands of miles of so-called empty atmosphere. And all these different channels have never become confused unless we have improperly channeled them. So we have all this proof that there is something out there in space. Now that what's out there in space is also subject to toxin. We can say that some broadcasts are toxic. we can say that anything that goes through that space, which by vibratory rates is not good, is damaging not only itself, but its recipients, and is also poisoning the channel. As long as we have corrupt patterns, as long as aggressive commercialism, as long as corruption is indulged in over the airways, we will have magnetic sickness in the air. We will have it in the air, and it will permeate our homes, our families, our governments, and our nations. We will sicken that level through which that particular energy flows, so that the energies that we use for communication have their own sicknesses. They have their own vibratory rates. And the problem is the corruption of a communication media does not mean that the individual will have a complete collapse of his system. It will mean only that that part of his system which is turned into that community medium will be damaged. He can go right on, go to church, and build up that one. In the meantime, however, the television is tearing down another energy field. Now, as you tear down these energy fields, which most people don't even know exist or believe in, you are also opening yourself to all kinds of sickness and also all kinds of moral energy decay. You are opening yourself to the corruptions of the life principles which are necessary to maintain you. The moment you damage a level of integrity in your own magnetism, that level of integrity becomes sick. The moment that becomes sick, part of the defense against exterior problems is reduced. The only way in which the individual can be really dominated by anything except himself is when he sells out his own energy and becomes negative to other things. He has to relinquish his own integrity before he can be damaged by outside forces. There isn't enough evil in all the world to destroy the integrity of one person. He must destroy it himself, or compromise it, or relax it, or be talked into something. But it has to be his own action. Therefore, the damages are, in a sense, not only moral, but are absolutely just in their actual integrities. And this is a way in which, apparently, as the Chinese noted, the universe creates the concept of right and wrong. This right and wrong is simply a matter of what builds up and what tears down the essential energies upon which life depends. So we have this problem in every field of life. We have it in the narcotics problem. We have it in a large part of commercialism. We have it wherever there is an attitude of putting profit in advance or over integrity. Wherever the individual makes this compromise, he immediately becomes a part of this particular problem. This is all part of the process of things being changed from what they appear to be to the energy equivalents of themselves, and then restored to their forms in order to be perceptible to our various faculty perceptions. Therefore, again, everything becomes a matter of keeping the energy fields clean. And the only way they can be kept clean is by using them properly. What is destroying us is our acceptance into our own inner life of the shortcomings and mistakes that we associate with civilization. We get into a political tangle, and we start hating people, and we start guerrilla warfares. And guerrilla warfare is simply another negative use of energy. All of the energy of life has to be used properly. The moment it is abused, it becomes dangerous. So we go on a little further into something else, the arts. And all of this is added up in a mysterious bank account, which is called energy, or magnetic resource. It is there to serve us. It is there to serve the individual who does wrong. But if the individual does wrong, the service collapses. And the individual who does wrong finally finds the energy turns back upon himself, and the corruption continues. We must keep this center of consciousness within ourselves in a condition of correctness. In Buddhism, the heart is called the Saptapana, the house or temple with 7 rooms. It is within this temple, as Buddha points out, that the great initiation against the hindrances has to be performed. The individual has to be initiated in his own heart. He must accept as a fact that his own integrity is his only strength, and also that his own honesty is his only wealth. All else is some kind of a delusion which will ultimately turn back and whip him. So in the quietude and peace of the realization of the immutability of good, the inevitability of right over wrong, the endless and continuous process of redemption going through every area of nature, all things in due time will come back into the peace which they sacrificed when they tried to put self as an individual above universal reality. Everything is energy. Atomic bombs are energy. The oil spill in Alaska is energy, waste energy, and abusive energy. All these things. And they all arise from something being wrong in the integrities of life. We have compromised principle by going away from the energy values. So we go back to the individual now, and we find him standing in the midst of his own magnetic field, with his structure protected by the constant radiating force of outflowing energy, an outflowing energy that vitalizes everything from the center outward and nourishes the solar system, which is the human body, from the level of the sun, as in astronomy. The ancient astrologers believed that these energy fields originated in man himself, and that the source of all the energy fields in the human body is the heart. That this is the thing from which all else radiates. Therefore, the most dangerous of all corruption is the abuse of love, abuse of friendship, abuse of integrities, abuse of fidelities, and abuse of those things of benevolence, mercy, and compassion which are associated with the heart. As those energies remain firm, the heart radiating out to the circumference of the magnetic field of the body is completely protective. It will be practically impossible for anything to damage it in the area where it is functioning properly. There may be other functions which is not yet perfected, but if the individual is basically honorable, he will be able to perfect these without too much trouble. And we will not be the first civilization, as I said in India, the great mother, the earth, has cast many civilizations from her back. Everything that goes beyond a certain point is destroyed because it breaks up its relation with its energy supply. It no longer is fed primarily by magnetism, because it's magnetism in the food that feeds us, it's magnetism in the air that we breathe, it's magnetism in the earth that grows our vegetables, and it is magnetism in our souls that makes us hope for good. We have been made gardeners in a beautiful garden, and we've let it go to weed. We have been given a beautiful planet, and we've subdivided it and sold it for profits. The original purpose was that we should become a wonderful group of human beings working together for the good of each other and the glory of the universe. We are being prepared for a bigger job than we have, but we are flunking the examination at the present moment. We are not doing what we should do. Everything that comes along is measured in profit. Everything that comes along is measured in freedom from responsibility. When energy is something that we must be responsible for, or we will waste it forever, or as long as we can. By the time forever comes, there won't be much energy left. But all this is a lesson in the morality of values. It is a lesson in the fact that we are the keepers in a garden. We are the gardeners in the garden of Allah, as the Muslim calls it. This is a beautiful garden that has been given to us, and we're letting it go to weed. We had a beautiful world with wonderful materials, so we dig under the earth and create materials to create war, death, and destruction. We have little gardens that we could have beautiful times sitting under our own palm tree, but we're fighting to take everybody else's garden away from them. And when we finally find a small plot of land that we might be able to use, we find the real estate agents have priced it 10 times its value. All these things all little things, but they all add up to the loss and waste of magnetic resource. They are the failure of the individual to protect the source of his own life, the source of his own future, and the breaking of the laws and rules by which he must compare his own needs with the needs of others. It is only when we work to protect the toadstool as well as the nation that we can have peace in the world. We must protect the small things, because each of them is a energy resource. The protection of them is against our viewpoint, because we take it for granted that the small should be controlled by the big. That small things, like humble people, are made to be exploited. This is not true. Everything in life is made to be used. Nothing is made to be abused. And the individual who abuses any part of life is contributing to the common cause of destruction. Now, this business of the energy and magnetic resource went on down through to the present time. And now we have a new measurement for it, and that is the development of a large group of electrical devices by means of which it becomes apparent to us that it is possible for the human being to make use of any energy as he sees fit. Now, the instrument that he has within himself is infinitely more wonderful than any television or any computer can possibly be. We can have a computer do everything, and it is alive. Don't for a minute think it isn't. But it is alive in a field of energy. It has a life. It can propagate itself. It can develop itself. It can grow up. It can grow old, and it can die, because it is all part of an energy usage. But in all of these usages, let's remember that the individual is humanity's prime asset. The individual is here to grow. And in growing, he grows by helping everything else to grow. The moment he goes into negative competitive relationships with everything else, he destroys himself. Every misuse of life responsibility, use of basic materials, the abuse of forests, the abuse of water, the corruption of air, all these things are paid for in magnetic defects. And we are beginning to recognize them now. We are wondering why some of these strange things happen that have been happening in the last few years. Nuclear fission is a great tragedy, not because it simply offends the peace-loving human being, but because it is a misuse, a violent corruption of energy. It is the use of a divine power to injure other people. Therefore, that which lives by the sword must perish by the sword. So our whole morality is a matter of life energies. It is a matter of gradually bringing all our intemperances into patterns of usefulness and creativeness and constructiveness. It is the gradual victory of a friendship over animosity. It takes the stranger out of existence and puts the friend in its place. Everything is part of working towards a harmonious balance of the natural resources of the solar power. Everything can be used to advance the common good, but everything that is used to destroy will be destroyed by its own destructiveness within itself. Now, another phase of that is now coming into focus very strongly in the problem of general reformation in human relationships. Now, we're going to have to finally settle down, and every person will have to decide whether he is going to fulfill his own purposes or whether he is going to obey the laws of nature. Everything is energy. Atomic bombs are energy. The oil spill in Alaska is energy, waste energy, and abusive energy. All these things. And they all arise from something being wrong in the integrities of life. We have compromised principle by going away from the energy values. So we go back to the individual now, and we find him standing in the midst of his own magnetic field with his structure protected by the constant radiating force of outflowing energy, an outflowing energy that vitalizes everything from the center outward. nourishes the solar system, which is the human body, from the level of the sun, as in astronomy. The ancient astrologers believed that these energy fields originated in man himself, and that the source of all the energy fields in the human body is the heart. That this is the thing from which all else radiates. Therefore, the most dangerous of all corruption is the abuse of love, abuse of friendship, abuse of integrities, abuse of fidelities, and abuse of those things of benevolence, mercy, and compassion which are associated with the heart. As those energies remain firm, the heart radiating out to the circumference of the magnetic field of the body is completely protective. It will be practically impossible for anything to damage it in the area where it is functioning properly. There may be other functions which is not yet perfected, but if the individual is basically honorable, he will be able to perfect it.
So now, Washington Irving is America's first internationally known author. He has got a worldwide audience, so he wants to write a worldwide bestseller. And what does he come up with? The Life and Voyages of Christopher Columbus. This becomes the biggest hit in American publishing history. Here is where the world is round stories come from. It's not out of fact, it is totally out of his fiction. You know, Napoleon once said, history is a myth men agree to believe. Well, so many people have read this myth that it creates what I like to call the Liberty Valance effect.
This is the West, sir. When the legend becomes fact, print the legend.
When the legend becomes fact, print the legend. Say that with me. When the legend becomes fact, print the legend. This is what's happened with Washington Irving and Columbus. He has created the Columbus legend. The legend has become fact, and we print the legend. When the legend becomes fact, print the legend. So, assume the position that pop culture is history. This world is round story is 100% bullshit. It's total fiction. It's not out of fact, it is totally out of his fiction. Pop culture is history. This world is round story is 100% bullshit. It's total fiction.